Hello, dear friends. We're sincerely glad to welcome you again. And today we're going to talk with the honored Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Greetings.
Igor Mikhailovich, in the previous video to the question who is a good person, you answered that a good person is a person who doesn't listen to Satan in his head. It's a person who is free from the slavery of shaitan, and that there is no such thing as a good slave or a bad slave, because a slave is a slave. And in fact, a good person is the person who is not influenced by Satan. It's a person who loves God, which means he also loves other people. It's a person who doesn't desire what he doesn't need, and he doesn't expect praise. And with regard to the expectation of praise, those of our friends who are engaged in spiritual self-development, who work on themselves both individually and in groups, they have noted an interesting point that one of the indications of the desire for that praise and the glory of this world is the inability to admit one's misdeeds and the desire to talk solely about the good. This is especially evident in moments of catharsis, when consciousness recommends to focus exactly on what is positive and not to talk about the bad, not to talk about bad things that happened, for example, 2, 3, or 4 days ago. Consciousness says, why bring up the past? After all, it is good now, right? So we should talk about the good. Where you look is what you strengthen. So a question arises, is it worth bringing up the past, or should people actually focus on positive experiences? Let's say, share that optimism, charge each other with positivity, strengthen the positions of personality both in themselves and in another person at this moment. What is more useful for a person?
I would say the following, friends. You should not confuse advertising with catharsis. Catharsis is more useful for a person. I would actually say that catharsis is the fundamental initial practice that every person should perform, regardless of what religion he belongs to, if he really aspires to God. If a person has really embarked on the spiritual path, it will be extremely difficult for him without catharsis. Why? It is important and necessary. Let's just take a look. What does catharsis give? A simple question. On the one hand, everyone sort of knows that. Many have heard of it. Many have tried it. In any case, it is something familiar. But I'll say the following. The first and most important thing that catharsis gives is the exposure of Satan, friends. It is what they tell us about in our religions. Yes, they say that it is necessary in the sense of exposing Satan. But the funniest thing is that over the first 400 years, Christianity almost destroyed the concept of catharsis. First, it made it secret, then it transferred it into something individual, and thus, the concept of catharsis ended. Well, excuse me, at least in some form. But catharsis lasted for almost 400 years, whereas in Islam, as soon as the Prophet Muhammad had left, those who seized power over the Ummah after him, over the Ummah of the Prophet himself, banned catharsis altogether. And as of today, there is practically no mention of it, but it was natural. And indirectly, this is confirmed and traced very well that in the time of the Prophet, precisely the exposure of Satan was used in the Ummah, and this very catharsis was an important and very necessary action for any believer, for a person who really aspired to Allah. Why? Any religion, I mean one which is at least supposed to lead to God, when it removes catharsis, it deludes people. I mean, without exposing Satan, how can a person understand how the devil works? Meanwhile, this is very important. If you don't know your enemy by sight, how can you distinguish a friend from a foe? A simple question. Whereas in this case, everything is far more important. In religions, they started saying that it's a sin to use catharsis, this very exposure. But I have a simple question. Is it a sin to expose Satan? Or is the sin precisely to be on the devil's side, to keep silent about all his intrigues, so that he can manipulate us from the dark? What is sin? The fact that we tell the truth about temptations from Satan and his tools of manipulation over us, or the fact that we hide this from others, even when we ourselves notice it. It seems to me that it's a huge sin to conceal how we are being manipulated by shaitan. After all, this is what kills people in the literal sense of the word and deprives people of eternal life. And to conceal this is a very big sin, as it seems to me, let alone to forbid the exposure. In fact, a truly free individual is the one who can openly and freely declare what shaitan wants, what tricks he plays, and what thoughts he tries to impose on a person, as if those thoughts belonged to that person. But if the person agrees with those negative, bad thoughts, with resentment or anger, then it all becomes his. And then that sin imposed on him by shaitan will become his sin, because the person will become offended or angry. Look how simple everything actually is. A human decides who he wants to be, an angel or a slave of shaitan, free or doomed. Everything is very, very simple. This very simplicity is granted by God Himself, whereas all complications are invented by shaitan through his intermediaries, by changing the truth and imposing it on people in a completely different form. From the truth, there remain only names and aspirations of people themselves, who go there allegedly for the truth, but fall into the clutches of the one who manipulates us. You see how simple everything is, while honesty on the spiritual path, first and foremost, before oneself and before God, is the most important thing. First of all, catharsis implies working with one's own consciousness. Just imagine, we live, and many people nowadays live even without understanding that thoughts arising in their minds do not belong to them. These thoughts come from the outside. So the question is, where do they come from? Is it the work of our brain? Is it the work of our neurons that in one or another situation form some thoughts for us, which come to us? A question, to us, means to whom? Aren't thoughts actually us? And here, anyone who is really unfamiliar with the rules of catharsis, who is unfamiliar with the techniques given to us by the prophets, that very Jesus Christ, the Prophet Muhammad, and many others before them. After all, every messenger sent by God speaks of the same path, and he speaks of the same God. God is one, while the ways to Him are many, as they say. In fact, the way is just one, and that way lies through Satan. Only by stepping over Satan can you enter heaven. However, it turns out that based on the knowledge brought here by the messengers of God Himself, people built religions that removed one of the most important actions, which is precisely the exposure of Satan. Let's just look into ourselves. Let's say, a person who has no spiritual experience, who hasn't really worked on himself, while this is the first rule, he doesn't know who he is, and he doesn't know where he is. All he perceives is a flow or a swarm of thoughts, and he lives without pondering. And the question is, does he really live? And that's where everything falls into place. If a person goes through life being guided by Satan, he will not go far. It's like traveling with Susanin. You'll never get to the place you need. And if the place you aspire to is heaven, but you don't have tools, and that very demon has replaced for you a map you are following, let's say, and instead of taking you to a beautiful city with marvelous gardens where there is life, where there are many people, where there is joy and happiness. He leads you into quagmires from which you will not come out. That's what has happened as of today. Of course, many people will argue, but my friends, it is pointless to argue here. I will explain why. Satan lives in everyone. This is something much closer than the carotid artery. Satan is the one who controls you and the one who lives instead of you. If you don't know it, and catharsis is a very important tool, I'll give a simple example. A person develops anger, hatred, resentment, or whatever against someone, and it just begins to absorb and corrode him. What is happening? Does it make it easier for the person? No. Is he with God at that time? Is he in God's love? No. He's in hatred. He is angry or offended in some way. All his thoughts and all his energy are directed towards that offense and that anger. This is what is called sins. This is service to Satan. In other words, to carry the burden which Satan has put on you. God has given you the path. He has given you the opportunity to come to Him. But instead of this, you take the burden that Satan has put on you, and you walk with it and suffer. Why? Because you are absorbed by thoughts. You are corroded by pridefulness. And what is pridefulness? Pridefulness is something that the devil has imposed on a human. Pridefulness is the devil himself. So when pridefulness ignites in you, my friend, when you begin to exalt yourself over someone, then it's no longer you. It means that at that moment, you are being controlled by a petty demon who is living instead of you. He is manipulating you. He is taking your life. And if you don't know the way to step over him, then together with him, you'll get into a state of subpersonality, into hell, as they say in religions. Yet, on the one hand, it seems that they were right, because they say, what is said in those very religions? Let's consider Christianity, when a person publicly proclaims
Yes, exactly.
his sins. Thus he is a temptation for others to start sinning. Why?
Or others exalt themselves,
Of course.
saying, I'm better than this person who's repenting now.
And that's what a sin is.
Yes, exactly.
So they begin to sin. They begin to exalt themselves over him, saying that they are better. Well, that's also a great sin. And allegedly, this was the reason why catharsis began to be used less and less. And later on, it was forbidden altogether. Everything was translated into such an individual secret confession,
Secret confession.
secret action, and so on. While in fact, it was impossible to use it anymore. And another main reason is that catharsis really gives a person an understanding of what the devil is, an understanding of who a human as personality is. And here, understanding who you are and understanding the tricks of shaitan, what thoughts he foists on you, what reactions he causes in your body, how he makes you envy, desire what you don't need, and dream of earthly things instead of striving for the divine, for the eternal. So, it is natural that a person who is manipulated by shaitan just doesn't go anywhere. He starts looking for simple and easy ways. You know, people often ask the question, what should be done? Or is there any way to get rid of that very shaitan in one's head in a simple and easy way? Meaning, of consciousness's manipulation over you. That is, how to get rid of it faster.
To weaken the system.
Yes, to weaken the system, to weaken the influence of shaitan. So they start inventing and advising some diets, exercises, or secret actions, you see? Well, this is nonsense after all. What does nutrition, tambourine dancing, some rituality, or something else have to do with the spiritual process? All the external, material things, whatever we may do, it doesn't matter what foot you get up from, what haircut you have, or what clothes you wear. They have nothing to do with the spiritual path at all. It only has to do with the culture you are in, with customs, or, I don't know, perhaps with some rituals, if they are being conducted. Like theatrical actions. You come to a theater, there's some kind of performance, and relevant actors come out, dressed in a certain way, so you understand what century it is and what's going on. Well, maybe. I don't argue. But nothing material has to do with the spiritual. In other words, you cannot weaken the Satan or the power of consciousness over yourself if you do not work on yourself. Even individual catharsis, which you perform, literally speaking to yourself and arguing with your own consciousness. But you try and observe already as personality. You observe what comes to your mind, or, to put it simply, what Satan wants you to finance with your attention, and how he wants you to live. He immerses you in dreams, in resentments, I don't know, in self-exaltation or self-belittling. That is, there is ordinary, natural manipulation by consciousness over us as personalities. So, when you begin to understand this, you start rejecting what is imposed on you. Satan makes you want something you don't need at all, and you realize that you don't need it. Why would you need, I don't know, something that will give you nothing but a burden, something redundant that you really don't need? At this point, common sense begins to gradually make you free. So this very catharsis, even when you practice it with yourself, enables you to live much easier and simpler. And it really endows you with that freedom by means of which you can strengthen that very love for the spiritual world and receive a quicker and more pronounced response from the spiritual world. After all, you no longer spend power in vain. You do not give the power of your life to feeding Satan and fulfilling his desires. You start living independently, and this is extremely important. Why? Because you begin to understand that a thought which comes to you is not the work of brain neurons that manipulate you, and it is not your desire that you ordered, but it is something that comes from the outside. It's an alien will that dictates to you. Once you realize this, you can already reject it, and if you have rejected it, you have already begun to expose Satan and see that you have both an angel and a demon in you. Look how much it really frees a person and how much it brings a person closer to the spiritual world, for this is true. Catharsis is, first of all, an honest conversation with yourself. It's an honest confession by you as personality of what the devil inserts in your head. It's an acknowledgement that you didn't generate this thought, but it was inserted into you, and it was inserted by the devil. He inserted it in order to manipulate you. And when you have this honesty with yourself, it doesn't matter, my friend, how many people are around you or who is in front of you. It's important that you are honest before yourself, which means, my friend, you are honest before God. That's the most important thing. What I would also like to note is that if you even start hearing whispers of that very Satan, if you start seeing those thoughts which are imposed on you, you are no longer shaitan's slave. You are already a human being, because you start seeing Satan. You expose him, and that is definitely the way to your freedom. It's a huge step towards the spiritual world, towards freedom and life eternal. Group catharsis is even better, but there is one but. In this case, group catharsis should take place in a group of like-minded people. Meanwhile, religions began to grow rapidly. So they gathered, let's say, a certain district. People came to a temple from that district, and lies already arose instead of catharsis. Why? Because when a person comes out in front of strangers, he is already exposed to attacks from his consciousness. That very demon tells him, you will start telling them what I tell you, and everyone will think that you are like that. You see? I mean, there was a lack of understanding and fear, so people began to lie.
Sort of a spiritual court,
Yes.
where a person is a criminal,
Of course, and people...
while those whom he confesses to.
Right, and people started lying. They started talking about something good. As we said in the beginning, that good thoughts come to them, and they started pretending to be saints. There's There's no other way to put it, which was wrong. However, that wasn't the reason why catharsis was terminated and forbidden to be used, but it was due to the fact that catharsis gave freedom. While a proper catharsis in a group is when like-minded people gather, people who really strive for the spiritual world, people who live by spirituality, and not just talk about it. Not those who sometimes go to their temples on feasts and weekends, light candles, and make vows, while being actually controlled by Satan. But those people who really stood up against Satan, who strive for the spiritual world, and are not afraid to look into the devil's eyes. When such people get together and really begin to perform catharsis, this is learning. Why? Because everyone speaks not about how bad he is and what he does, but about what the devil advises him. And do you know what the scariest thing is? I mean, for religions and for that very demon. The scariest thing is that when a person says that such and such thought came to him, it doesn't matter which, a negative one, then a lot of people from the same group begin to confirm that it happened to them too. Thus we see the pattern, meaning the sameness of the impact on us as personalities by that very Satan. And we begin to understand that, yes, in fact, he seems to have a lot of tools, but these tools are few in number. In reality, he is not as strong as he seems, but he becomes weak only when we recognize him, when we have exposed him. And already as personalities, we understand that we exist in symbiosis with a representative of not only the spiritual world, but also with a representative of hell. This very conscious moment actually enables a person not to stumble and not to make mistakes anymore, to see and to understand that in case of his slightest wobble, he will be immediately intercepted by the devil. The person will have to make a lot of effort to stabilize himself again. Thus, no stumbling saves him time, precisely for the sake of saving time, because human life is very short. People performed catharsis, the one that Jesus Christ taught them. And thanks to that catharsis, a whole group or mass of people was formed, the so-called first disciples of Jesus Christ, true disciples, and there were many of them. From them, such a group was formed. That was called Cathars. And they had kept this notion of catharsis, opposition to Satan, for almost 1,300 years, until they were destroyed by religious representatives, or, to put it simply, by those who forbade exposing Satan and introduced ritualism instead of God's love, by those who told people that they were God's slaves. While Jesus Christ said, love God, they said, fear God. And just look at how it all unfolded, right? Everything is simple. We are not against religion, but we stand for the truth. Exactly the same thing happened in Islam. As a matter of fact, there is one teaching that the Lord sends to this world so that people can come to Him by using it. And He sends it through His messengers. This teaching is simple. It doesn't require any interpreters or scholars. It is so simple that anyone can understand it. And by taking these tools, every person can liberate himself and make himself spiritually free. Thus, it is very important to expose Satan. Until you, my friend, know that there is Satan, you will doubt God. But when you start working on yourself, observing, resisting bad thoughts in yourself, and not accepting them, you see how Satan imposes them on you. And when you see that you have started coping with these bad thoughts, you begin to see how your near and dear people, friends and acquaintances around you, are becoming more aggressive. If you overcome that too, you are already close to victory, and there will be less and less pressure of the devil on you, so to say. But it all starts with a simple catharsis, or to put it simply, with the exposure of Satan. Then it is easier to live, and then it is easier to understand, let's say, what the spiritual path is. However, by removing this truth, humanity has lost a lot. Therefore, catharsis is very important. But I'll say it again, catharsis is good when there is a group of like-minded people, and when everyone in this group understands that a person doesn't tell beautiful fairy tales, but tells the truth about what Satan dictates to him. And when everyone realizes that it is Satan who dictates to him, and it's not that the person simply speaks from himself, that's when true catharsis actually begins. That's when everyone understands those manipulations and those tools which the devil uses. There are not many of them, but they are diverse. So, when the next time a thought comes to a person from that very demon in his head, with some temptation, the person already understands what the subsequent thought will be, and how that very devil will force the person to go against his own principles, your principles. It is that tool, owing to which the devil will be able to lead you astray from the spiritual path, and will simply try to make you dead. This is simple. It is understandable and easy. Yet, when ordinary people who supposedly believe in God get together and start practicing catharsis, and when somebody says something, let's take a simple example. Satan tells Tatiana something against me, whereas he talks a lot against me, and Tatiana starts voicing it to me. Okay? While I perceive this not as the demon saying that to Tatiana, but as Tatiana telling me that, what will happen? I will resent Tatiana. Tatiana will resent me in response, and that's it. Thus, what the devil wanted will actually happen. But if we understand perfectly well that it is the demon talking, hence, I understand perfectly well that since he says that to Tatiana, his next step will be to start telling me something against her. That's the way he works. He divides people. And why does he divide? In order to rule over us in this world. In order for the consumerist format to flourish here. In order for all of us to simply be his slaves. But most importantly, so that angels do not come to the spiritual world. Yet, our task is completely different, friends. The task of us, as humans, our task is for each of us to step over Satan and take a firm step into heaven. This is very important. Nothing can be better and more important than that. Even the whole world isn't worth it if you do not enter heaven, my friend. That's the utmost important point. Meanwhile, everything begins simply with love for each other. Therefore, friends, let's just love each other. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Igor Mikhailovich.
Thank you, friends. Peace be with you.